Hi, this is Aaron. I run Great Viking Games and SolForgeFusionDecks.com, and you're listening to Soulbind.
You're listening to Soulbind, a new podcast about the people who play the hybrid card game SolForge Fusion and their relationship with this game. I love this game, and I'm curious to find out what others love about this game too. How were you first introduced? How has the game changed for you over time? And what are your hopes and dreams for the future of the world of Solus? So thank you for joining me today, Aaron. I'm really excited to get a chance to meet you because we've had a few messages back and forth on Discord for various bits and pieces, but I want to get to know more about you. I want to get to know more about your relationship with this game. Could you give me a brief intro? Like, how did you and SolForge meet?
Well, thank you for having me on, Bryce. I appreciate it. SolForge and I met probably, whatever it was, 10 years ago when I first played the original digital version. You know, I was pretty young then. I think I was maybe just out of college or in college. I can't remember exactly, but played it quite a bit back then, mostly limited. I don't remember playing much constructed. I remember playing the limited events, and I remember every time I would finally kind of like lose, I'd run out of the in-game currency or whatever it was, and I'd be just like pushing to like, oh, should I spend on the next, to try to spin it back up and run a few more drafts. And so I don't remember a ton of the original game, but it was definitely brand recognition when I saw the Kickstarter come up maybe a year and a half ago. And once I looked into the game, it definitely was super compelling because I'd recently been playing Keyforge, was really excited about Keyforge and the just the way the decks get algorithmically created and the fact that no two decks are the same and that they're so much fun to play in the limited format, which has traditionally been my favorite format in any card game. And so just kind of dove into the Kickstarter and have been kind of, off and on playing competitively for the last year and a half.
That's awesome to hear a number of things. First of all, that you are a Keyforge refugee like me as well, that love the game, love that kind of like limited format, different things in combination. Each time you open a pack, it's something a bit different and a bit new, but definitely feel like SolForge, is the superior for me, at least in terms of that experience. But I'm interested, when you got your first Kickstarter decks for SolForge Fusion, when they came in the mail, do you remember what it was like the first time, like starting to play it, starting to look at the lanes and anything else that, was a bit different or that you were coming to terms with when you were first? Is it you able to throw yourself back into that mindset?
We got actually a lot of product. It was myself, my brother, and then a couple of our in-laws. We, I think, had maybe like 8 starter kits. It was quite a bit. And we sat down at the table, cracked them all open, and played the first time right then and there. And I remember they hadn't quite like spoiled the full set. They had intentionally left some of it vague. So there was a lot that we hadn't seen. And it was just super exploratory. The whole night was super exploratory, just kind of like figuring out the rarities. I remember being really confused by the rarities with the way that the kind of the modifier had a rarity, and then the base card had a rarity, but then there were some base cards that didn't have modifiers, and those also had rarities. And there, so I remember there was a lot of discussion around that. And I remember we were looking in the little corner, the number in the little bottom right-hand corner, and we were like, oh, this is the 46th ever printed. And there was just a lot of just like first exciting, elements to that night that was just really exciting.
That's awesome. And we went through something similar. Me and my buddies only picked it up in December 2023. So at this point, that's like 4 or 5 months ago. But similar sort of thing, cracking packs, looking at cards, trying to figure all out, and just that joy of unwrapping and excitement and not knowing the cards. Do you remember, was there a moment where you kind of clicked with this game where it really cemented itself as, I really like the way this game plays or how it makes me feel when I play? Or maybe this was like an evolution over time of you getting to terms with the game and how it runs?
That's a good question. I don't I don't know if there was a moment in time. I think it was kind of a slow burn because I think I kind of picked it up on the offhand of like, what's the harm? I don't mind. I spend $50, $100 on a board game here and there, play it a couple times, ends up on the shelf. And I've got a handful of TCGs, on the shelf now that I'm not currently playing. So I remember just kind of like, we cracked it open. We played it a few times. We thought, man, this is really neat. And then it just kept hitting the table, and we'd show it to a few more people and they'd be interested, and it just kept hitting the table. And it probably had a good staying power in our local community here for maybe, I don't know, close to a year. But the thing is we only played sealed. Every time we brought new product, we didn't actually, I don't know if we ever played constructed. I think we just played sealed over and over and over again, with a small group here who eventually a handful of them kind of die off, and I ended up moving more towards the Discord to kind of fulfill my my SolForge needs.
Yeah. I love playing sealed. It's one of my favorite ways as well. I have a bunch of booster packs that I keep on the shelf, and it's just, I won't open them unless I have a buddy to open them with, because I love that experience of, even if they're a newer player, you pick two halves, I'll play the other two halves. Let's just go. Let's do some exploration. Let's find some new stuff. It's such a joy. Back to the theme of the podcast, Soul Binds. What do you think it is that binds you to this game? Because it's one thing to like get into a game, have the experience, like you said, where you're playing with your buddies, you're opening new packs all the time. But to commit at least a couple of years to a game, what do you think it is that sort of binds you to this game versus, all the other ones that might be floating in your orbit?
It absolutely is the deck algorithm. There's something about the unique deck generation, that the fact that every deck is unique, that every deck has little pieces of synergy that you have to find and assemble and put together, and you feel so like clever to discover these. There's something about that it has not gotten old, and I don't foresee it getting old. And I don't know if that's the algorithm, the game design. Like, I haven't designed a lot myself, so I don't know exactly maybe what it is about that, but there's something about the way that the decks are randomly generated, and then you just have to kind of figure it out. There's some level of marketing in my mind that's just like, okay, this is a gimmick that only SolForge has, and I can't get this anywhere else.
Yeah, great answer. And I would expect nothing less from somebody who went to the trouble to build a website to try and break down and score and figure that out for games. It's like you're building your own algorithm to pay respect to their algorithm. So I'd love to know more about that. What led to you creating SolForgeFusionDecks.com? Obviously, this has been a long-term pursuit of yours, because something like that just doesn't happen overnight.
So I've been, as a hobby, running Viking Games, which is a kind of a fledgling collectible TCG small business, and it's kind of a side project, although I put probably a lot more time into it than I'd like to admit. And one of the fun projects we got into was we just, we bought out a store that was looking to liquidate some of their SolForge inventory. We bought it out, and we ended up with like 800 decks, and it was like, we're not going to use these, and we might as well offer these up to the community. And we had bought and sold Keyforge back in the day, and so I had a lot of let's call it experience in dealing with these unique deck games. We probably sold like 800 Keyforge decks back on through eBay and other forums, etc. And so we got into SolForge, and we started selling on eBay, and it was really cumbersome to sell on eBay. Like, it was really difficult. If you've tried to buy SolForge on eBay, it's very difficult. You've got to open the deck listings, etc., and try to look at the images and understand what's in there and see if you can even figure it out. And so anyways, I'll fast forward because, we basically said, hey, we want to make this easy on the folks that are buying. So we imported it into the collection manager, we put it in, but then it was like, even then, I don't want to sit and barter with every person. So I just said, I'm going to put a value on every deck. And at that point, I felt like I'd played enough and had enough experience with the secondary market to have an idea. I was like, I'm going to get some wrong. The buyers are going to get some wrong. It'll be fun either way, right?
Well, that's kind of the excitement too, isn't it? Like the excitement of somebody is finding something that you've undervalued. There's a joy in that too. So a little bit of selective of that is good, peppering it in.
Yeah. I have been a lifelong learner of economics and I do pricing as a professional. And so it was just kind of this culmination of, this is really interesting. I want to see if I could actually just automate this, and if I could just price these decks through some program, then it would be really simple for me. We could actually build this out and scale this and be really interesting. And so I built that out, was using it for myself, and was running sales. And a lot of people started reaching out saying, hey, like, how are you pricing this many decks? Can I see what you're doing behind the scenes? Can you run my collection through the engine so that I can see kind of what I have that may be interesting or exciting to play, et cetera? And so I ended up getting so many, and it was quite cumbersome actually, because it's not an easy thing the way I had built it. I'm not a software developer by trade. I had some experience in college, and so I basically said, hey, what if I could put something into a browser that was, again, kind of the same theme that I've always found, which is, if you make it easy, people will use it, people interact with it, right?
100%.
So I just said, if I can put it in a browser, people can punch in their username and get some value out of it, and quickly scan through and find some of their top decks, then that could help some new players, maybe some veteran players, and build, a tool for the community. So that really is where SolForgeFusionDecks.com came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, it's been an awesome tool so far. I mean, I have to apologize already. I feel like I was one of those people that definitely spammed you in the DMs going, what are my best decks? Because I think that's something that when players have that first moment, they've opened some packs, they want to know what's good, but it is quite hard to evaluate a deck. Even if you get more familiar with the collection manager and you're looking at the different values, there's a lot that goes into considering what's a good deck, not the least of which, what's the partner for the deck and how's that going to interact. So I think it's great. And I hear it a lot from new players, and you probably do too. Like, the number one question is, I need some help picking my decks. I'm not sure where to even start because, mathematically, once you get 10, 12, 14 decks, the options are almost limitless.
That's what's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's what's so exciting, right? Yeah, it's so exciting, but it also is so overwhelming for a new player, right? And so, I mean, I even to this day still probably feel like I'm not qualified to even answer confidently, like, hey, you should look at this deck or this pairing, et cetera, because there is so much nuance that goes into deck pairings, let alone a single deck evaluation, which, to be clear, SolForgeFusionDecks.com is really looking at a deck in a vacuum, understanding the competitive ecosystem. It does look for, hey, you've got some competitive connectors that are often paired with, these other things in a different colored deck. But it's so difficult to actually fuse a deck and have it do well in this game that the tools that I've created are really just scratching the surface of what's out there and what's possible with SolForge, which is honestly so exciting, right? If you could solve it with a quick algorithm, the game would be a lot less interesting, right?
I totally agree. I was just about to make the same point. Like, if it was so easy, like I found with decks of Keyforge when I was a player, I would just play the decks that had really high ratings, and I wouldn't play the ones that had low ratings. And I felt that was always a bit sad, like some of the exploration was kind of solved. So I kind of, as much as I want your website to succeed and grow, I like that there's that built-in limiter but there's always the caveat hanging there, like, what are you going to fuse it with, and are they going to work together? And that's like the unknown from now until the end of eternity, kind of, isn't it?
It honestly, there is such a beauty to it. I mean, the other thing that helps too is the community has been relatively small. I would argue that even in just set one, there is still discovery out there, like archetypes, maybe some tier 2, who knows, maybe some tier 1 abomination style decks, as the Forgeborn finishing guys like to call them, just like something got put into a deck, some betrayers or something that just creates an archetype out of nothing, right? Just with what's in that one deck. And every time I am playing in a competitive tournament, I am always looking at what somebody's got going on, thinking, like, that's a really, really interesting, synergy that they got going on. It's usually maybe a take on something I've seen before, but it's got a little splash of something I haven't seen before or I've forgotten about. And so it's just so exciting. Honestly, it's what keeps me driving to come back and look at lists and just keeps me interested in the game.
The one thing I wanted to get into next was like other relationships. So, you're a gamer, I take it, who's played other games before, and I definitely see the users at home aren't seeing what I'm seeing, but there's quite a few games in your background behind you. So what are the games that you're playing right now, or have you played in the past that you've sort of either fallen out of love with or you're still in love with? You know, some people like lots of different games and they have the bandwidth to do that. I'm the kind of person that I'm a one game guy. Like I'm just in SolForge right now. I'm not in anything else because I don't have the space for it. What about you?
I would definitely say SolForge probably has the bulk of my gaming right now. But I grew up playing a ton of Magic and actually a lot of competitive Magic. Never owned a collection really.